There we are. Much better. We can start our industry going again. A barbaric victory. Matilda always wanted to live in an apartment. It was a strange obsession considering she was raised in a lovely big house with her parents there to guide her along. But she always felt strangely trapped. It was so ornate, so perfect, so clean. She supposed the life of an aristocrat never suited her. She always was an active girl, first in the class at field hockey. If she stayed at home, she would probably have ended up getting married off. The room was quite bare, really. They had put a rug down to try and lighten the place, and of course there was that chair that Paul lent them. But really, mostly nothing. She heard a call from the other room. "Matty, darling, do you think we'll be fine without curtains?" Olivia limped in, her crutches supporting her weight as she entered. "I think we'll do fine." Matilda smiled. The day passed. After a lengthy argument about who'd get to sit in the chair, Matilda managed to get Olivia to just sit down as Matilda sat on the floor. They didn't exactly have anything else to do. The post-war scene in England wasn't entirely covered in people hiring, so they talked, and talked, and talked, and talked. The cloudy sky grew dark, and they started to talk about the war. Matilda suddenly remembered. The church, the terror. "I killed someone, and I enjoyed it, Olivia. It excited me. I guess in the moment I was scared, but, well, he had a family, and I killed him. I saw the light drain out of his eyes, and I just... Matilda's voice grew hoarse as she started to quietly sob. Olivia looked down at her crying beau, and for once, she didn't know what to say. HMMLR is victorious! The forces of Her Majesty's most loyal resistance have secured their control over England. Though some holdouts remain, the majority of the old government units have disbanded or surrendered. Peace and freedom have returned to the land, but the price has been high. Thousands of English soldiers and civilians are dead, and the former workshop of the world has been reduced to rubble. It's time to rebuild. Oh, no, we got another one. Which we have to click again. Did that affect my... No, we're at 60% utilisation. And we could potentially even go higher. Although the deficit has become a problem again. Do I want to just keep piling in the production? At this point I kind of do. I mean, as long as we're making a surplus, it's fine. And there we are, 100% utilisation. 15 civilian factories are on it. Sweet. Oh, and we also got an army back. Yeah, all of them. Sweet. In fact, we even gained some. And these are all now just regular old infantry. So the infantry are going to be commanded by Sims, I think. He is, after all, an infantry expert. Although Kendrew is too, but Kendrew's old guard. No. That just won't do. Yeah, Sims, definitely. There we are. And I think we can probably bump up to speed 5 again. Over the rainbow. The building was just as she remembered it. Sullen brick and a shade of dark brown. Mossy footpaths cracked and broken. The cloudy sky might have seemed dreary to many, but to Matilda it was as if the world were as bright as a day in Seville. It was just as it was before she left school years ago with Olivia by her side, walking into an unknown and dark organisation to try and find some semblance of hope for the future. And of course they'd come far, such an amazing distance, and here they were, back where they started. "Hey, Matty!" Olivia shouted. The cane was new to Olivia, her leg having recovered to the point that she didn't need the wheelchair anymore. She stumbled over to Matilda, smiling confidently. God, it really hasn't changed, has it? Matilda grinned and snorted. I suppose not. "Why did you want to come back?" "Well, it's where we met, isn't it?" Olivia replied. The girls wondered, noting the little things they remembered. Olivia's chalk scratching that got people gossiping about whether Maggie Thomas was snogging a layabout named Otto in the nearby boys' comp. The classrooms where Matilda would stare out the window, thinking of the 10 minutes she would have with Olivia at the end of the day. Lastly, of course, the bike sheds, the same bike shed she swore she lived in. God, we used to sit down there all the time, Olivia said as she looked up and down the back of the sheds covered in dried mud and overgrown moss. Yeah, it was never really very tidy, Matilda said, sitting down. Olivia sat down alongside her. Matty, I remember a couple of years ago I was sitting here and crying because my dad said something about people like us, and, well, you said you'd always stay at my side, and that's really struck with me because you have. And I love you, and I want to stay by your side too, and, well, Matilda Lewis, will you marry me? Matilda was in shock. Olivia, what do you mean? We can't. It's not legal. It won't be legal, but we can hide it. I know we can hide it. Yes, yes. Matilda teared up as Olivia grabbed her into a kiss. The two women, hand in hand, left the school together in a brighter future. Fates intertwined. Interesting dichotomy about TNO. Such wholesome content, unrelenting horror. The National Republic of Komtau declared war on the Kazakh Soviet something or other. Socialist Republic. How is Kemerovo doing? Are they still alive? Yeah, they are. However, they are currently fighting against Tomsk. Really? Tomsk? Tomsk declared war on Kemerovo. Interesting. They haven't gone for Orosia or Novosibirsk or Siberian Black Army yet. That seems like a really early war against Tomsk. The first reaction was one of shock. Was this really it? Did that announcement really happen? At the front, there was a bit of hesitation. Nobody wanted to stand up before the men on the other side did. But slowly, the trickle of collaborators began. They came as individuals first, walking over with their hands up. Then came groups marching over the white flags. Then it became a flood as the entire army disarmed and marched over to give up. Many were tired. Some were sad. Others were happy it was over. The rebels were tired as well, but there was a growing euphoria among them. The civilians were the next to crawl out, most of them hiding in their basements, hoping the white bedsheets and construction of their homes would keep them safe. After the shelling stopped, they knew something was up. Then came the HMMLR cars, proclaiming the announcement from their speakers. The civilians then came out looking at the destruction, and the victorious army marching forward, while the vanquished being herded towards the rear. Far beyond the front lines, in HMMLR territory, the mood was a lot less subdued. Massive celebrations broke out all over Free England. Everywhere ran dry of alcohol consumed by the revellers. They crowded around the HMMLR headquarters, calling for Alexander, for Auchinleck, for Stirling, and when one showed up, they cheered euphorically. And who could blame them? The suffering and bloodshed was over. Families could not be bombed out. The young men of England could grow up. No longer would England be asked to bear the terrible sacrifices it had endured. England would know freedom. At last the enemies are laid low. Cornerstone of democracy are undoing their evils. So that's more freedom-y stuff. Stability. Reduces food insecurity. Replacing one-year draft with volunteer only. Which reduces recruitable population, but there's a massive increased stability. And then normalcy for the food security. So what is the food insecurity causing us right now? Organization's down, population is massively down, stability is down, GDP growth is down by 3%. No, we want to do that first. Undoing their evils. England is wounded. None can deny that our land is shattered remnant of what it once was. The Civil War caused much destruction, it is true. Tens of thousands of needless deaths and entire towns left broken by shells and gunfire. Yet the collaborationist government did a great deal of damage in their rule as well. Damage far harder to heal. Our academics were hunted or forced to toe the government line, the union of workers beaten into submission or forced underground altogether, to say nothing of the political persecution of the opposition parties. It now falls to the HMMLR to repair this damage, to undo what went wrong and give the people a glimmer of hope that the future we promised will be worth the wait. Be we soldiers of Stirling, Alexander or Auchinleck, we owe our countrymen that at least. Gives you flashbacks of when Central Siberia just couldn't unify because Kemerovo just wouldn't die. Huzzah for Kemerovo! Yes! How's the economy looking? We are still making a surplus, which is magnificent. I think I'll keep a little bit in the reserves. We still have no special events or anything, and that's okay. I'm actually even half tempted to increase civilian spending. Civilian budget will be increased by 15%. That's what? 3.5 billion. 350 million. Yeah, we can do that. Just 500 million-ish. Yeah, I would say it's worth it. It means that we get another 2 civilian factories and then also the 10% construction speed. We don't really need a surplus. We're not Iberia. I mean, eventually, yes, we'll want to pay off the debt, but right now I'm quite happy to just have GDP roaring off. Evil's been undone. Begin the demob, or clearing unexploded ordnance. We definitely want to do that. Wars are not accurate affairs. As often as not, a shell or bomb will miss its target entirely, and with significant fighting in urban and rural areas of England alike, we now face the unfortunate problem of numerous explosive devices, including actual landmines, which, for one reason or another, failed to detonate as they were intended to. Using an all-volunteer force, Claude Auchinleck and Bill Alexander have catalogued the areas with the highest number of unexploded munitions and sent demining crews in to slowly solve the problem. This might well take years to effect fully, and it is entirely possible that England will never be 100% free of explosive refuse. But it will be an improvement for our people. And stability in the GDP growth will be amazing. As actually will the taxable population. And also a couple of, other benefits like reducing poverty. Debt isn't fully implemented yet. Yeah, I know, but I try to do what I can to make sure it doesn't become ridiculous. Radio in a household living room. With all of these demands and shortages of coal, it's up to the householder to economise. Women to husband on couch. Oh, woman to husband on couch. But what are we going to put in that grate this winter? Gestures the empty fireplace. Tea leaves. Now don't get excited, madam. Blimey, who's that? Only me. What I was going to say was the government is asking you to do 2 things. Order your coal as soon as possible and take 10% in coke or acarite. But does coke really make a great fire? Oh yes, if you go the right way around it. You light the fire in the ordinary way with coal, using small lumps. Then, when it's going well, add some coke or acarite to the front or to the back. Oh, and remember to keep the underside clear of ash, and you've got a good draft. There you are. Remember, order it now, and remember, get 10% coke or acarite. Good burning. Nice day. Oi, what about a radio? We want to hear it now. Sorry guys, I forgot. But remember, order now, 10% coke or acarite. And coke is a type of coal. There are 3 types of coke in the world. Only one of them is illegal. Oh, and now I know how to spell blimey. It just means crikey. Blimey and crikey are entirely interchangeable. There's a Swedish YouTuber that looks exactly like you. His name is Ufosum. I have not heard of them. A solemn duty. Alfred Fisher has always been proud of the fact he took up the diaconte rather than the priesthood. Oh, diaconte instead of the priesthood in the Church of England. Diaconate? Diaconate? Oh, it must be a diaconate, as in diocese. It was a sinful feeling, true, but Deacon Fisher never told anyone but God of this particular flaw of his. Perhaps it's what made him what he did all the harder. St. Joseph's Hospice had been a winery before the war burnt its vineyards to ash. Alfred liked to think his patients enjoyed the view of recovering plant life more than they would the dull concrete of an hospice in the city. It would have been easier if the hospice had been for the old, but many of the men Alfred had to help to do even the simplest of things were startlingly young. Some of them had no doubt sided with the government, others with the HMMLR. Some might have been communists, fascists, royalists, republicans, or a dozen things more. It mattered not to Alfred. What difference did it make if the men he gave the sacraments to were from the side who lost? He had to help the amputees into their wheelchairs every day all the same. He would read books to the blind and comfort those mentally affected as best he could. He did his best, and he begged God for forgiveness for all that he simply lacked the time to do. War takes from all sides, and gives little of substance. Deaconate. So it is from deacon, okay. Just spelled weird. Diaconate instead of deaconate. Which would be like, okay, I get that. Surplus of 100 million. We can drop some more into the debt. The Tribacal Principality declared on Sacra, the disposal team. A car pulls up to a farm in Islip, a village in Kidlington. 6 men op out, 1 officer, a sergeant and 4 soldiers. The area was the site of heavy fighting in the Civil War, and the farmer is unable to plough his fields due to the amount of unexploded ordnance. It's a valid concern, especially at sites which are prone to digging. Just last week, a man was killed by an S-mine outside of Ipswich while digging a drainage ditch. One of the soldiers takes out a metal detector and begins walking, scanning the ground in front of him. The others follow behind, the other soldiers carrying shovels. After a short walk, the man with the metal detector hears something unusual in his headphones. He stops, scouts the area a bit with his underground sonar, and then raises his hand. The sergeant and officer come over, as well as a man with a shovel. Lightly digging the surface up, they try to find the source of the disturbance. Most of the time it's nothing. Just some lost object or a piece of scrap. But this time it's something to be scared of. It's an artillery shell that's failed to explode upon landing. They dig around the nose gently. Then a man removes the fuse and the shell with a delicate precision. He pulls it clear. The shell is now disarmed. Another man takes the case and begins pulling out the plastic explosive inside. He burned away later with the other ordnance they find here. The men march on behind the man with the metal detector. There are thousands of acres of England contaminated with ordnance, and they've only cleared 1 today. On to the next one. Ooh, stability. Lovely. Begin the demobilization, which is even more stability. The struggle of liberation was one undertaken by a good many tens of thousands of loyal Englishmen. From villages and factories, dockyards and farms they came, men and boys and even women who all knew that the evils of fascism and totalitarianism had to be expunged from our nation, whatever the cost. The top ranks have spoken, and it's been agreed that now that the struggle is over, it's time for most of our men to return home. Let them trade guns for hammers and rakes for ploughshares. Let them return to normalcy. A professional corps of the HMMLR fighters will stay on, of course, but they will exist to form the backbone of the future English army, not to oppress the people they were supposed to protect, like the traitor forces had done. Begin. 3 types of coke and you don't want them mixed up. That's true. How's the German Civil War going? That is a good question. Speer actually seems to be pushing Bormann. Goering not really making any moves, although the river there is going to be a bit of a barrier. So I think Speer is actually doing quite well. Again, he was nominated the successor, so he might have some boosts now. Oh, Tomsk has fallen. We're seeing the rise of Kemerovo here. Pierre Poujade elected as the President of France. The political crisis in France, ignited by the bitter defeat in the recent Burgundian invasion and the regrettable disappearance of the former President Tixier Vigancourt, seems to have been resolved. The Assemblée Nationale has elected Pierre Poujade, leader of the Parti National, as President of the French state. Perceived as a status quo candidate, even in regards to foreign policy after the recent military disaster, his victory comes as no surprise for the well-informed about French politics. Finding strong support among the middle classes, the farmers and the craftsmen of France, Poujade has vowed to empower the strata of French society as the backbone of the country's economy, a platform met with suspicion by the upper classes. The new president seems to enjoy the support of the armed forces, at least for now, but only time will tell if he is able to maintain stability. Le monde a besoin de la France. La France a besoin de tous les Français. Don't know what that means. Vive la France. Drink some tea, spare your throat. I mean, I know that TNO is going to ruin my voice, so just kind of used to it by now. Plowshares, that an agricultural tool? Yeah, plowshares is just the long form of plow. It's the blade of a plow. The world needs France, France needs the French. Gotcha. Is Spear winning? I think so. We'll need to watch. I mean, Goering is attacking... Yeah, he's across the river. And he's about to cut off Goering's Holstein forces. He's definitely pushing. Gods of the North. Reports have slowly begun filtering down from the movement in the distant communes of Siberia. What it is, really, we cannot say, but the fact that any form of news is leaving that region alone has set many to wondering what exactly could be happening. Surely, if the communes are making any kind of stir for the first time in 20 years, it must be in some form important. Reports speak of stirrings from the religious. Those few traders who make their way out of the far north of the East Siberian trade routes have spoken of entire communes chanting in prayer and churches being filled to the brim, and some figure pushing them forwards. Nobody knows exactly what spurred this to action, but the people of Siberia keep praying for one man. They call him the Father. Nothing but nonsense. Just like him in Montana. I quite liked Far Cry 5. It was a good game. And that's basically the Siberian Far Cry. When is Assassin's Creed Valhalla due to be out? That's this year, isn't it? We're actually making more money. Deficit's gone up. Sweet. Okay, demobilization done. Life begins anew. Which will give us even more GDP growth, and also much more taxable population, more income, more poverty rate reduction, more stability, more weekly stability. And it removes the growing hunger. Which we do have. Reduces manpower and reduces stability. Workers are dead or displaced, fields have been trampled, silos burned, and livestock killed. And the infrastructure of the country has been destroyed or damaged. The result is the hungry voices all over the isle, crying out for bread, soup, or anything to stave off the hunger. The war is officially over, but the food supply has not been taken care of quickly. A massive starvation in its wake will claim many more lives. A promising future. The last guns have gone silent, the dust displaced by shelling and munitions has settled to the ground, and now post-war England has emerged. An England damaged and destroyed, yes, but an England no longer constrained by the same chains that once held her in bondage to the German eagle. An England with a future of her own choosing, an England closer to democracy than ever before. An England closer to a bright future, that fabled Jerusalem that will be built on our green and pleasant lands. We mustn't make a rash mistake and ruin it now. Okay, so yeah, that's a lot of positives. The HMMLR is a volunteer force. We had no need to conscript when the vast majority of our fighters were militia or defecting soldiers. Alas, but being a volunteer does not insulate our soldiers from the effects of combat. Shell shock is rampant amongst those units, which spent a great deal of time on the front lines, especially the militia formations, which bore the brunt of much of the fighting. Many who fought for our cause lost limbs, senses, and even family members when brother fought against brother amidst the chaos. We owe them more than mere words can convey. We should do our best to ensure that nobody who sacrificed something dear to their person for a free England will be forgotten, and that those who sacrificed everything shall be remembered forever. So how are we doing with the poverty rate? It's still shrinking, but I think that's going to be reversed by this finishing. Poverty rate... Oh, no, it won't. It's still going to be shrinking by 0.25. Spear is on a roll. Not so much against Bormann, but Goering is Goring is getting absolutely crushed. And if he can cut these guys off, then all of the units that are up here will be added. Vic S, thank you very much for the 8-month resubscription. Very much appreciate that. Thank you. Spear is the bad German. No, Spear's the quote kind of good one. Spear is the reformer. He's the least bad. He's still bad, but he's the least bad. Followed by Goering, followed by Bormann, followed by Heydrich, probably. And I think Heydrich's already out. Defeated by Spear, because Heydrich's usually over here. Life begins anew. Towchester had come in for heavy punishment in the war. Artillery had hit many of the ohms, and vicious house-to-house fighting had caused further damage. Many buildings were destroyed, and the citizens had fled far away from the fighting. Today, they're trickling back, clearing the rubble and trying to rebuild their town. There's talk of rebuilding St. Lawrence's Church, levelled by the HMMLR artillery strike to dislodge a collapsed sniper. Taunton got off a bit easier than the other towns, but it still had massive changes. The German garrison was eliminated, and an English one was put in its place. The signs in German are gone now, replaced with English road signs. For the younger citizens of Taunton, it's still a shock. One day, the German soldier would shoot at anyone out past 11, and now the English police officer just tips his hat and walks on his way. They're getting used to it. Even the spot in London, where the blast happened that started this old business, was returned to normal. Cable Street is as quiet as well, and cars go up and down without much thought. Except for the monuments, raised by the government to commemorate England's long and eventual struggle towards freedom and liberation. All around the country, people have put the worst of the Civil War behind them, as well as the unpleasant bits of the aftermath as well. The darkest chapter of England's history has left deep scars, but they're no longer cuts. And now, England can move towards a better tomorrow under freedom. We keep marching through. Cornerstone of democracy. For years, England was the main force behind freedom and democracy around the globe. The entire might of our nation ensured the world would always stand against despots and would-be world conquerors. But today, our system is broken, and England is controlled by an emergency military dictatorship. We must restore democracy as soon as possible to make good on our promises to the population, and to show we really are going to create a free and democratic England. Meanwhile, debt is... We're making more and more money. This is weird. Keep paying down the debt. Awesome. Bormann's unstable. I played him, and he's so unstable there's a whole mechanic called the House of Cards. Interesting.